On this episode of Real Talks, we're going to discuss, is it a behavior or is it a trigger due to trauma? Let's talk about triggers. Did your foster kids have triggers, and can you share some of those? What happened?
Yeah, it was early on. It wasn't right away, but I remember had VeggieTales on. I think all the kids were watching. It was a Saturday morning.
VeggieTales is a
Christian
cartoon.
Yes, it's vegetables dressed up as different things. So it's very, very safe. So we thought we were watching, and all of a sudden our foster daughter just started freaking out. She was 4 at the time. She just started screaming and ran away and said, "Turn it off, turn it off, turn it off."
So screaming and bloody murder.
It was almost upstairs, what is our son doing to bother? Stop! What's going on? And he's like, "I'm not doing anything. I'm just sitting on the couch." And so I'm she's crying, she's yelling. Maddie was upstairs.
I was upstairs. I don't
taking a nap or something.
Oh.
And it was the weekend, so I was on. And so I go down and I sit and I talk to her, and she's just uncontrollable for a while. And so I'm just holding her, and I'm like,
you still don't even know what's going on.
No idea what happened. And so we're talking, and she's still coming out of it, but she's like, there was the cucumber policeman. The policeman
talking and broken.
He touched me. He came to see me and I'm like, what are you talking? And then I realized it's she's probably going back to that night. And so minutes go by. I'm holding her. We're
the night that she was removed.
The night she was removed. So she says, parents. I remember the policeman came in and talked to my mom, and then they had to sit down and talk to my brother and I about. And he took us or something. It was.
And he had to search my body.
He had to search. I don't know, something like that.
Yeah.
And I just remember thinking, wow, this was very much trauma. Yeah. Coming back, she almost had to relive that time of being taken away from her mom and dad. And
and she was 3, so she could at least give you something.
She gave me something.
What if she was 2?
Yeah.
Right? And you still wouldn't have even known.
Yeah.
So that was hard for you, right?
Yeah. I mean, it was at the end, it was at least some clarity on oh, this makes sense, and this is very much a trigger for her, but it was...
And other things, it would be on a walk, and she would become petrified of pine cones. Pine cones! Or at the beach once, seashells. And it would just almost be all of a sudden we're walking, and then... my son's collecting pine cones, and she just starts freaking out over nothing and is afraid of the pine cones, and then it becomes almost like a game with the kids. But and you're just wondering why are you afraid of pine cones? No, you're not. You weren't yesterday. Right. Or seashells. We've been at the beach for a week. We're on day 5, and today you're on a walk, crying uncontrollably about being afraid of stepping on the seashells. And we never got real answers for any of those things, but it would just come out of the blue, and she'd be afraid of just the
Some of the triggers make sense, right? The police officer, where it's oh, okay,
that's
this
clear.
is, we can trace it back to this. But the pine cones, it's to seashell. She had never been to the beach, so it's not there's any precedent to that.
So let's be real, because you guys are parents of 5 kids. And she's freaking out over something that you think is so ridiculous, right? Because I've been there with my own kids. How do you determine if it's a behavior and they're just acting out, or that it's a trigger? How did you guys determine that or deal with that?
Not well.
Yeah, I was gonna say it's I think ultimately it's just for your own kid, you just respond. I was typically more with the foster kids. I was more. Gentle and just would patient. Yes.
Trigger, right?
And sometimes eventually it would get old.
We got to just keep walking. You can't stop because there's seashells everywhere. We have to keep walking. There's no other. What else are we gonna do? Right. Or carry her for a little bit and try our best to nurture her through it. But yeah, I mean it's trying.
But I think
on your patience.
It comes back to the same thing we talked about earlier of. One of us is typically more patient at the time. It's I will take her, you take the rest of the kids, we'll work through it.
Yeah.
And
we do that even with our own
with our
biological kids
but
now.
Even in the aftermath, maybe I did this book study where you address something and you, instead of saying what's wrong with you, thinking what happened to you.
Yes.
Right? Like something happened to these kids. And But I love that you said not well. Because even though you're being honest, you don't always handle it well, right? No. But I think it's important that foster parents realize there are triggers. And you may never know.
We've never gotten the answers for, like, what caused that response.
And she saw police officers other times, you know, I mean,
all the time.
You know, we would see police officers on the street. She would say hi. We do. So it was something about that cucumber police officer.
In that moment, at that time.
It just hit way harder. We never.
And now Pinecone's, like, even, she was just at our house 2 weekends ago and came in collecting pine cones from our yard, and she was like, look, Maddie, look at all my pine cones, I'm not afraid anymore, and like threw them all around, because it was like a family joke of like, remember when you were freaking out about pine cones? And she laughs about it now, but again, she's never been able to tell me like, it's because of whatever this, and she doesn't know, because nothing happened to her with pine cones. I don't think so.